Hey adapters, I'm Doug Parsons. I'm a partner at Simpatico Studios, where we live stream conversations about complex business and social challenges with professionals like yourself who are working on the same issues. Our shows are live streamed in front of a global audience of your professional peers on simpatico.tv. I'm building a new type of online community for professionals like yourself on the Climate Adaptation channel. If you're a regular listener of my America Adapts podcast, I think you'll find that we're taking our conversations about important problems, policies, and solutions to the next level here. And if you're interested in being a guest, we'd love to hear from you. And now join us for this latest episode. Hey adapters, today our guest is Dr. Juliano Calil. He is a pioneer in science communication and is co-founder of Virtual Planet Technologies, which works with communities to address environmental issues including coastal flooding. Juliano is a senior fellow at the Center for the Blue Economy and adjunct professor at the Middlebury Institute of International Studies. Coastal hazards are getting more severe due to climate change. We need better and more engaging ways to communicate risks and solutions to diverse audiences. Juliano shares the drawbacks of traditional methods and the advantages of interactive, hyper-realistic virtual reality experiences. Hey, Juliano, welcome to the show.
Hey, Doug. Thank you so much for having me.
Well, I've been looking forward to this conversation. We're going to be talking about virtual reality, but first I want to check in. How's it going with the pandemic? How is it affecting what you're doing?
So yeah, the pandemic, it kind of hit us as we had some events planned. And as you can imagine, with virtual reality, you're trying out a headset. And the way that we typically do this at events, we have a series of these headsets and people try them and swap them out. So that's not going to happen for a while, I don't think. But it was a good time because we have about 3 or 4 projects that we're working on at the moment, and they're all at different stages. And we're finalizing a couple. We're just starting a few others. So it kind of helped in a way that to fly, we fly the drones to prepare some of the images for VR. So it's being much easier to gain access to some areas because they're closed to the public and things like that. But it also got me thinking about ways, how do we get back from the pandemic? Like, how do we transition back into some of these events? And one of the ideas that we're working on is on a sterilization box with the UVC lights that we're developing as well. And that was kind of I never thought I would work with anything like that, but I saw some out there and we kind of designed one, and now we're in the process of testing it out. Because if you get your headset, you put this into this box, you turn the light on, in less than 2 minutes, it kills like 99.999% of all DNA. So we're going to be testing some ideas. So it's been kind of an interesting, but also gave me time to seek out other collaborations and partnerships and some projects that were kind of on hold. So overall, it's been, we're trying to take advantage of, what's coming our way, but it's been mostly positive on our end.
Well, that sounds very productive, these technical things that you're doing. And on that note, let's talk about the work that you're doing with virtual reality. But first, I guess some context to that. And if you think about the traditional ways of adaptation planning, you're trying to come up with other ways to do that. But what do you mean by traditional ways of adaptation planning?
So there are 2 things that I think about. One is that most of the workshops and the engagement meetings and outreach, like if you go to a community meeting, typically there is a big like 2D chart that's printed out like a Google Maps view of, sometimes it's a satellite image. And then areas that are projected to be flooded are painted like in blue. So it's like a flat view, it's like 2D, it's very hard to relate to that. So that's one of the things that we're tapping into and trying to overcome that difficulty that some folks have. And I've been in meetings where we show maps. And at first it was hard for me to even realize that because I grew up with maps. I work with geographic information systems like online maps for many, many years. So to me, I see a map, I know exactly what's going on very quickly. But there are folks out there that don't have that background, and they look at a map, and sometimes I see just like a blank space, like, well, I don't get it. What are you trying to show me? And this is actually being studied that, not every brain is the same. So we're trying to kind of take that communication process beyond those traditional kind of methods of communication.
All right. So I guess there's a need for this, and like, who are some of the partners that you're working with? You're doing adaptation planning, you're coming up with some communication tools, but where's
Mhm.
that demand coming from?
So we started with the sea level rise explorers, so looking at coastal communities. So when we had the idea, we reached out to the city of Santa Cruz, where I live, and Tiffany Wise West, who's been a guest from your show. And we reached out, said, hey, we have this idea. It's a concept. We're not quite sure where to take it. And would you be willing to work with us? We'll kind of develop, see what you need. How could we use it? And that became kind of a key thing for us. We only work on projects if there is a community engagement component. And if there's already an effort going on to actually bring what we're doing out to the community and get some feedback and see how are we going to use that. So we started that way with the city. And then from there, we developed a partnership with the Nature Conservancy as well. So we worked on a project with them in Maryland, in Long Beach, here in California. And also now we're just starting one at the Elkhorn Slough, which has been kind of a fun, kind of different idea. But we also partner with other communities. So we're working with the Paradise Recreation and Parks District on a wildfire experience, which has been super exciting, and we can't wait to get that out there. Trying to communicate, the risks of wildfires in California and beyond, on the West here and Australia and other places, and what can we do to reduce some of those risks in the future. We on the Long Beach project, we partner with the Aquarium of the Pacific. It's part of that effort as well. In Maryland, we work with it's called the Turner Station Conservation Teams. So it's a group of folks that are looking at a neighborhood, like a traditional African-American neighborhood, and see how they can revitalize a park and make it more resilient to sea level rise. And they're working with the Port of Baltimore on that as well. So it's a very diverse kind of set of partners, and which also makes this work super exciting.
I'm glad we're actually having this conversation because, I know Tiffany and she was recruiting me, and we had those conversations where it was a grant that she was applying for. And to be quite honest, she's like, okay, there's this VR element. And I mean, she's looking at, and I had no clue what she was talking about. I mean, I would read the proposal. I'm like, sure, that sounds good. And so now that I've dug into your work, I'm just like, so that's what she's wanted to do with this. So it was probably more on me. Okay. So I want to step back a little bit here too. I think, maybe I don't want to assume too much. And so virtual reality, we always think of just putting those goggles on, and I think that's what it is to a certain extent. But could you kind of give an overview, really, what is virtual reality and why would you use it in the first place?
Yes, so that's a great question, and that leads to one of the other partners I didn't mention, but we are in communications and starting a collaboration with a group at Stanford, the Virtual Human Interactions Lab. So they're doing a lot of research on the cognitive behavior and impact of using virtual reality, and there's emerging kind of research showing that virtual reality can create and kind of invoke pro-social behavior, and in a way that other applications can. So the idea is that when you put the headset on, and they did functional MRI studies on this, where you put the headset on and then you were looking at things, the parts of your brain that get activated are the same parts of your brain that get activated when you're actually seeing the real thing. So that's something that we're trying to tap into when you look at a coastal city and you see, maybe a park or a street or a neighborhood being flooded. In virtual reality, it's like, even though we had a project at the library here in Santa Cruz, you're at the public library sitting at the chair, but to your brain and physiologically, you react as if what you're seeing is real. So we have one of the scenes in our application that's you're on a virtual blimp. So you have aerial view and you're kind of flying above some locations. And some folks that are a little afraid of heights, their palms start to sweat, the heart beats a little stronger. So you get a very similar reaction that you would in that situation, but it's in a safe and controlled environment. So we're also planning this study with the folks at Stanford and in Santa Cruz to look at if folks that use VR and go through our Sea Level Rise Explorer experience, what kind of preferences or what kind of decisions are you going to make after going through a VR experience versus going through a traditional 2D map? Are they going to be more likely to choose a nature-based adaptation option or an engineered one? how is that going to work? So we're in again, it's kind of early stages, but we're basing a lot of our kind of insights into a study from that was done by two Dutch scientists, where they looked at, it wasn't even VR, it was like a 3D screen, and you could control like a person going to a village, and then the dike would break, and then you see a flooding. And the people that had the power to control the player in that situation declared higher intent to purchase flood insurance and also to evacuate in case of emergency than folks that even just watch that same situation. So that's kind of why I think VR it's an interesting and promising medium to kind of communicate some of the things.
Okay, so I just have that right. So you're currently working to determine. So it isn't like determined yet, though, like people's preference to like how they see information, how they might make a decision. You're just kind of looking into that, but at the moment you don't have results.
That's
right. Okay. Yeah, I find that interesting because think about, like you said, some people respond to maps differently. Like my wife, she'll look at a map and it might just be, a different language. I look at it, I'm like, oh, that's where I am. We just read things differently. Yeah. But I imagine with virtual reality that if you're engaging with a public audience at a city council meeting or something like that, you're going to get a lot of blank faces if you don't have the right information. But if you just give them the kind of right, I'm just sort of assuming this is what you're trying to do here, is that you stick a VR mask on them, you're going to get out of them the kind of information that you sort of always wanted that you just haven't been able to do, right? I mean, that's sort of the hope.
Absolutely. Yeah, we had an open house event here in Santa Cruz about a couple of projects that are going on to look at, how the coastline is going to respond to climate change and coastal erosion. And it was at an auditorium, and we had all the stations, I think it was like 7 or 8, where people would come in and they would walk over and hear about the impacts of the economic impacts and cost benefit analysis and all these other things there's this massive study that's being done. And then we had the VR at the end, and I heard from multiple people after they went through the VR, I was like, oh, why didn't it start here? Now I get it. So it really kind of, we make this experience, they're like 7 to 10 minutes long, and we tell the whole story, like, why is this an issue? What is the community considering? What is at stake? What's vulnerable here? And more importantly, I think, is like, what can we do about it? So how can we spark like an interest in that person that's seeing that may not happen otherwise, and hope that they're going to be, inspired to take action, to participate, to at least join. If we get a dialogue started, that's a big thing for me. And in a lot of cases, folks, after they take out the headsets, we have, 5, 10, sometimes 15-minute long conversations that you just don't have it if they just pass by like a poster or something like that.
You must have seen this, and maybe you were even involved. I don't know if it was about a year ago or 6 months ago, but I think it was the Weather Channel, and they had like a flood, sea level rise thing, and there was I think it was a woman there, and but like you'd see cars hitting this wall, and it surrounded her. And at that moment, this is the greatest sea level rise like generator I've ever seen, because you've got a human scale context, you've got the dynamics and emergency aspect of it. I mean, what do you know about that project?
Yeah, they have a fantastic team of CGI and special effects, and they use what's called augmented reality. So you kind of project things that are virtual into the real environment. So they have an interest in one of the tornadoes. I don't know if you saw that, no. But the guy sitting is like standing, and then the lightning, the post just falls on the stage. So you kind of mix those things. So I think they're doing some incredible visuals. I think what we try to do is take that one step further in a way that we bring it to the community context. Like in Santa Cruz. And when we do the virtual experience, you're in this virtual room, and we make like sure that the room reflects that community's kind of personality. So in Santa Cruz, we wanted this like a beach house, kind of a beach shack kind of feel, kind of funky. When we went to the East Coast, one of the projects it's in the park that they're trying to make more resilient. There's a senior center, and they really like the lunchroom. That's where everyone hangs out. So that's the virtual room that you're at. So trying to make that connection as well with actual projects that are going on. Yeah.
I got a question from the chat room here, and from Islamul. Do you think introducing virtual reality to the kids in school, where the schools teach them climate communications, can give us a head start for making them aware in the very first place?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I talked a lot about this with our colleagues at Stanford and also some other virtual reality folks. And there are a couple of things going on there. One is that depending on the age of the kids, the headsets, they're designed with like the distance between your eyes really make a difference on how well they work. And as kids are still developing, their heads are still growing, so that distance may not work really well. So there's a little bit of that, it's not very clear what the effects of using VR in really young kids for long periods of time are. The other question that comes into play is like, what is the age appropriate to start teaching kids about climate change? Because there's this whole, for a while there, the kids are going to fix it, which I think it's an absurd kind of pressure to put on the next generation. Like, no, it's your problem. We messed it all up. No, you're coming up and you have to solve. But depending on how it's done, it can add a lot of pressure to them. But having said that, I'm a proponent of using VR if you're like 13 years of age or older with your parents' approval, guardian approval. I think that's okay. But limiting the time as well, because it's so hard to manage screen time these days of kids. And if you do that with VR, it's even cooler. It's even harder to get them out. But we're actually working on a project that we just got a grant from the OPC to work on a virtual reality-based class talking about marine protected areas in California. And we're targeting like from, I think, 13 to 17-year-old kids to do that. So I think it's a fantastic tool. I think we should use it. Just keep in mind that, the subject matter and then the age kind of appropriateness there.
Well, it sounds this is what you're trying to do, but I imagine, Santa Cruz, college town, in innovative communities are trying these cutting edge things. And are you trying to create a system where you can, and it sounds like you are, but, what other communities that might not have these resources, or quite frankly, they're not even thinking about these things, but if it's such a useful tool that you'd hope that this becomes standardized in, emergency response or flood planning. What's going on with you in that respect? Is that sort of a goal?
So that's another great question, because up to now we took like we don't want to grow too fast. We just don't want to, because a couple of components that we're working with, like it's very important to have that on the ground engagement with the community. One of the things that we didn't plan it that way, but it turned out to be that way. Every project we worked on, there was like a strong community leader involved, someone that the people trust, that will kind of help us write the message in a way that would be relevant for that community. So I think that's kind of a part of the goal as well. But having said that, what we did after we did the project with Santa Cruz, we looked at other projects that were coming up. It's like, well, we can't just recreate this from scratch every time. So we developed a platform that it's based on, so the structure of the application is pre-built. So if we wanted to move from Santa Cruz to, let's say, Long Beach, all the cogs and wires are all preset. So we just have to capture a new image and kind of plug and play. You replace the audio, replace the 360 aerial view, the 3D model, and then we adjust the duration. So we're making it as easy as we can to replicate this experience. I think the fastest one we developed so far was in a little over 8 weeks for the project. And the other thing that I'm noticing is that I'm hoping other people would pick up on this as well and start developing tools like this. I think we're still a little bit ahead on the technology side, where we were able to find a way to make this really affordable, whereas maybe others are not there yet. But I know I think it was the NOAA in a partnership, I think with Climate Center, maybe they put out some really great visuals that are very similar to what we do using Google Maps. So they're not as high resolution, and they don't have like the storytelling and the whole like dedicated and focused approach that we do, but the visuals are starting to catch up. So I'd expect that we're going to get more and more as we start or continue to digitize, every city almost in 3D you can find right now. I think we'll see more and more of tools like this. And especially in VR, there's virtual tools. Google has this amazing called Google Expeditions with Cardboard, which is like the first VR kind of mobile thing that came out. You download the kit, you cut the cardboard, you buy a couple lenses that are really cheap, and then you put your phone in there, and then you can go explore different areas. So they have classes that are set up for that. So I think this is coming. And now with the pandemic, I'm finding, what a great tool to have at home even. As part of the class that we're developing, we're going to get like 30 or 35 headsets, and we're just going to lend them to different schools at different times. And even if the kids are home, they can go, there's a process we're going to design to check them out. Maybe they keep the headsets at home for a week, and then they can do explorations. They can look at climate change. They can nature. It's really unlimited, the potential, I think.
Okay, we got another question from the room, and it's from Ken. How do you envision using virtual reality maps to help FEMA first responder recovery teams plan out how they will respond to a real flooding disaster?
Yeah, I didn't talk to FEMA about this, but we had a meeting at the Coast Guard here in California a couple of months ago. And one of the ideas was, you could imagine that you have an emergency and you're flying a drone with a 360 or a virtual reality camera that's being fed through like simultaneously live to a war room. And someone is with a headset and it's like they're on the helicopter or they're on the drone even flying and looking at what's going on. So I think that's a tremendous potential. I think there's still some technological limitations on bandwidth because the amount of data that's being transmitted is quite large. But I think when 5G is a little more prominent, I think we're gonna start seeing things like that. Another thing that you can do with VR and the drones is that you can put infrared cameras on the drones as well. So that can help you find different features based on that. And there was one other thing. VR, yeah. Oh, and then we're also starting to see an integration between machine learning and aerial images. So that's another field that I'm very excited about. So you can write algorithms to identify features. And people have, I think some research has done that before, looking at trying to estimate property damages by looking at rooftops after a hurricane goes by. So that kind of, I think, usage is going to be more common. And for once, I'm super excited to see what, you can count features, you can count cars, you can count, many things. And as these things get automated, you just push a button, the drone goes over the area. You can have, there's this concept of swarms of drones where you fly like 10 drones at the same time and they cover different areas, and then you can integrate all that data into this command center. So I think it's super exciting. I think those are the good uses of, drones and the technology.
I'm having flashbacks of going to those mapping classes, and Landsat will just become irrelevant with all this such low level coverage. I got one more question for you, and before we wrap this up, but again, from Ken is can maps be imported or re-exported? Do they contain all the necessary topographic data that is needed?
So the short answer is yes. We are, for the Paradise map, what we're doing is we have almost the entire Butte County in a 3D map. It's when you put the headsets on, you're gonna sit. I just had a preview and it's fantastic. So imagine a 10 feet by 10 feet 3D map on top of you. And we've done that using the shuttle mission data for topography, and then some satellite images that we did. But for the models that we're using into the VR, which we do with the drones, so we create those separately. So they're georeferenced still, but they're 3D models that are in there. We don't use GIS data. There are ways of incorporating GIS data into this 3D models. But what we found so far is that it's faster to do the artistic rendering manually, and we're getting better results. But I expect that connection should be a little more robust in the upcoming months.
We're getting some. I'll have one more question, and then we got to ask these in the just chatting. But will it be possible to get satellite data populated into the VR apps in real time? Is that something you're looking at?
We have not looked into that. I think it would be really useful if we could. For this, the Paradise map, we got a satellite image from like right before the Paradise fire happened, or the campfire in Paradise. So you can see kind of the before and after images. But I think you just need to look at each use, right? How would that be relevant to you, and what's the use case? Because as we get this constellations of satellites now taking photos all the time, and as they become available, it's not that hard to do to incorporate that in VR. But that real-time aspect of it complicates things quite a bit. So you're looking at it, and there are other things that will happen, different layers that you're gonna augment that image with, and how do you integrate that? So I think it's a super interesting data integration problem. We haven't started looking into that yet, but it's something I find really fascinating.
All right, this has been great. We're going to go into this just chatting to kind of wrap this up. But this has been fascinating, and it sounds like there's many other topics that we could talk about. Hopefully, we can get you back, and as these projects unfold, or maybe we dig down into a specific project that you want to talk about, I think that would be really interesting to hear about. But this has been great, and I look forward to future conversations.
Thank you so much. Yeah, this is great. Thanks, Doug.
All right, so hold there. We're going to just come back in a second here, but let me wrap this up.
All right.